weeks ago, Rep. Daniel told me that some undergraduate student interviewed him about Jewish renewal and asked, does it still count as Jewish renewal if there are no drums present?
And no one's in the forest to hear it.
Probably not. So I'm wondering if we're allowed to start with our name in our it's not that great. Maybe. What do you want to say? Okay. So this is a lecture that I've done quite a few times in all sorts of settings, in churches, in mosques, in synagogues, if we're undergrads, and it's always a completely different dynamic, and I'm sensing that this will be nothing like I've ever done before in that regard. So I'm pretty much tweaking it as I go along, so please forgive me if if some stuff seems incredibly basic and some stuff seems a little too much. Feel free to stop me at any time. I'm not one who loves lecturing. I like talking. So if there are any questions at any time, jump in. No problem at all. So first time I made this a public lecture, which is part of my master's actually. I used the term taken from Facebook that was just starting out at that time. It's complicated. The relationship between Jews and Muslims has always been complicated. It has never been straightforward. A lot of us have heard the myth that Jews and Muslims lived happily ever after without any problems, without any hostility, until Zionism came along and had to ruin everything. And a lot of us had heard the counter myth that Islam is inherently violent, that Muslims have always hated Jews, it's in the Quran, so it must be universally practiced, and they always were hostile to each other, they always will be, there's no point in even trying. All of us have heard these two hyperbolic assertions from the media. Obviously, if you're watching Fox News, you're getting more, or if one side, if you're watching other stations, you're getting the other side. Nobody here watches Fox News, though, I'm sure. We also all heard that term Islam is a religion of peace. It is just distorted by the media. We also probably heard Judaism is a religion of peace, and any violence is just politics. And when I teach undergrads, I say, how many of you can say Christianity is a religion of peace and keep a straight face? There is no such thing as a religion of peace. There is no such thing as a religion of war. Religion is what you make of it. Who knows it better than people sitting here? Love Green said yesterday that you have a lot. That sometimes you have more in common with a Hindu practitioner than with somebody with a Litvak Jew who's studying with the views of ohalah, and is more concerned about that than the bigger picture. And I wanted to ask, do you still have, but sometimes you have a lot more in common with that Litvak Jew because the shared history, the shared texts. And I wanted to ask, do we still have that in common with, let's say, the Hilltop youth?
Starting hand to green, loading cemetery.
Are we going somewhere?
I'm so sorry. Orin, thank you, Orin.
All right.
I just turned the video off.
What was the question?
The question is that how much do we even have in common with people like the Hilltop youth that are using the same texts as we do, the same davening?
Who are the Hilltop?
Sorry, Hilltop youth, the West Bank underground groups who are torching churches and etc. At the end of the day, yesterday, I mean, after Dr. Green's talk, I asked someone, you know what, these Hilltop youth just said hello for Rosh Chodesh, right? At the end of the day, we have a lot in common with them, and it kind of scares me. Are we the same religion? Probably yes, and that is something that that I think we have to keep in the back of our minds. every tradition has the potential of being interpreted in a pretty scary way. And it doesn't matter if it's Judaism, it's Islam, Christianity, even Buddhism. You know, we don't think that Buddhism is all about peace, love, and unicorns and rainbows. But, exactly. Burma. Sri Lanka also. People are people. Doesn't really matter what religion they come from. You can take any text and do pretty much whatever you want with it. And a little later, there's an Islamic scholar from UCLA. His name is Khalid Abdul Fadl, who coined the term that I use in pretty much every lecture I ever give. A text is as moral as its reader. And this is what we're going to start with, some texts.
Could you just tell us who that quote is from again?
His name is Khalid Abdul Fadl.
That's a really.
We can't.
We don't know how to spell it.
He's right,
Khalid
Nick.
Abu Okay.
What was that last one?
I'm sorry, I have the handwriting of an MD, not a PhD. That's Khalid. Two types of head. Sorry? You're right al if we'll get into Arabic pronunciation, we'll not get out of here till midnight at least. He's a scholar of Islamic law in UCLA. So I think we're going to start with a quick review of how Islam traditionally treated other religions. So, most basic Islamic text is the Quran, which is like saying that the basic Jewish text is the Torah, meaning, yes, the Quran is important. Yes, the Quran is a revealed text in the same way that the Torah is treated as a revealed text, but the Quran is the beginning, it is not the end. Muslims also have Torah Shabbat Peh, they have oral traditions, they have something called the Hadith, which is a collection of sayings and acts done by Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, or Muhammad's companions. So the Quran, kind of like the Torah, is a starting point, but it's never the final word. Kind of like with Torah Shabbat Peh, if the oral tradition contradicts the written tradition, oral tradition wins at the end of the day. And kind of like with the Torah, even the written tradition contradicts itself quite often. So when the Quran talks about non-Muslims, it talks about several categories, and the Quran recognizes a lot of different religions that were common or known in the area. It talks about Jews, talks about Christians, talks about Majus, which nobody knows who they were, but apparently it was a religion that was common in the Arabian Peninsula at the time. Zoroastrians, and something called Mushrikun. And that is a word coming from the term shirk. Shirk is translated often as shituf, associating earthly beings or objects or people with God. It's basically the Islamic version of Avodah Zarah, right? People, polytheists, or people who worship anything that should not be worshipped. Jews, Christians, Zoroastrians sometimes are not treated as mushrikun. They're not idol worshippers. They worship the same God, and the Quran recognizes it very, very clearly. That when Jews and Christians and Muslims talk about God, they talk about the same God that Muslims do. Allah is not a different kind of deity. It's just Arabic for God. I can't stress this enough. I know most of you know it, but still need to emphasize that. Another term used in the Quran is children of Israel. Banu Israel, Bnei Israel, the same one. That most Islamic commentators actually claim that it relates both to Jews and Christians, interestingly enough.
And not Muslims?
No. Banu Israel are children of Israel. Muslims come from a different family. Muslims kind of like we do treat Islam as the descendants of Ishmael. So they're not children of Israel, they're not children of Yaakov, they're children of Ishmael. We split at that level. Like many Jews in Israel say, Muslims call Jews sometimes cousins. Right? And all of these groups, Mushrikun, the polytheists, Jews, Christians, Zoroastrians, are also referred to outside the Quran in a general term. Kuffar, or infidels. Kofir, same root. But Jews and Christians, kuffar, yes. Infidels, or heretics. But Jews and Christians have their own category. People of the book. We tend to think of ourselves as people of the book, and we take pride of that term. It actually comes from Islam. And it doesn't mean people who like to read a lot. It means people who got a book from God, got a direct revelation. So the at least traditional Islamic belief is that Jews did get a revelation, that Moshe got something in Mount Sinai, that Jesus got something, but somehow these revelations got distorted along the way, and that people changed them for political reasons. That could never happen. And that Ezra described when he wrote the Torah down, inserted a few iffy things just to get some political power because of the struggle between the Kohanim and House of David. Ezra was a Kohen, so he kind of dissed David quite a few times, and we can do a whole lecture about that. It's kind of fun. And same goes with the Christian teaching. They do believe that Jesus was a real prophet, not a son of God, not born of a virgin birth, but that Jesus was a prophet, just like Moses, just like Abraham, and just like Muhammad. But Jesus' teachings were distorted by the church later, and then there was a need for a third and final revelation that cannot ever be distorted. So the Quran contains teachings given in the Torah, given in the Gospels. Only this is the right one with no distortions, and this cannot be distorted. God said His word 3 times, and 3 times only, and there cannot be another revelation after that. That is the basic Islamic theological beliefs. That is with regards to the Quran. One more thing about the word kuffar, the word infidels. Using this term by Muslims today is very contentious. Meaning, when a Muslim describes Jews or Muslims or anybody else, you can just say non-Muslims or Jews or Christians or people of other religion. If they're using the term kuffar, infidels, it means exactly what we think it means. And you will probably not be surprised, it is a term used to describe Muslims that don't agree with you.
The Sunni and Shia.
Sunnis, Shias, or fundamentalists versus modernists. Yeah, they have their Islamic renewal groups that are treated exactly like we're treated by the Orthodox. And that's the way it is. When people are using the word kufa, it's a statement. Yes?
How does the word Jimmy?
Dhimmi.
Yeah.
Dhimmi. We'll get to that in about 5 minutes.
Excuse me.
Yes.
First of all, I apologize for being late. Second, I'm wondering, do
Can
we
you speak
get?
up so we can hear the
I'm
question?
sorry. So I apologize for being late.
Don't worry.
Thank you. Do we get any credit, or do the Christians get any credit for being people of the book, even though we are considered infidels?
Absolutely. And this relates to the question with Dhimma, and so we explain
Thank you.
in a second. So basically, Muslim law treats people of the book differently from infidels in several ways. Muslims are allowed to eat our shafted meats, for instance. Kosher meat is halal, it's kosher for Muslims, not the other way around. But if, for instance, a steak was shafted by a Jew or a Christian, it is permissible for Muslims. If it was shafted by an atheist, no.
We had in Berlin a Muslim butcher and his shochet was a Jew.
So that happens in many smaller communities when when
It's not
basically
a small
shochet
community.
serves both communities. And when there is enough cooperation, you can both sides benefit from it because they are allowed to eat the importer. So it's also economical to cooperate with that.
In Borough Park, when I lived in Brooklyn, there was a live poultry market with 3 separate lines of slaughterers. There was the kosher slaughter, the halal slaughter, and the generic slaughter. And you would go and pick out your chicken and then decide which slaughter you wanted.
Where was this?
No, that's
Borough
not
Park,
right.
Brooklyn.
About that.
Good grief.
Well, another
Question, etymological question. Kufar, is it related to the South African word kafir, which is a pejorative term for lax?
I imagine that I can't imagine it not being related.
Yeah,
That's Dutch. That's a
That's
Dutch
Dutch.
word.
That's Dutch?
Yeah.
Ah.
It's kofel. Right? Exactly, kofel b'ikar, someone who denies God.
What does it mean in Dutch?
Um,
But if it's Dutch, then there wouldn't be the connection.
Actually, it's not really Dutch.
Yeah, it's not Semitic, but
Yeah,
there might have been
It's
influence.
not the how to speak compare.
It's what do you call it, a spelled word?
Yeah, it's a bad word. That's
It's,
why.
it's calling someone something bad, but it's a Dutch word, yes.
Another issue that comes right, like I said, Quran is only the starting point. There's the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the Hadith. Hadith are like traditions attributed to Muhammad or his companions. So it's stuff that the Prophet either said, did, agreed to, or silently nodded when it happened, basically. And there are thousands and thousands of these traditions, completely contradictory. And there is this Islamic science that developed in the Middle Ages that tried to establish which of these traditions are correct. And there's this classification of traditions. There's correct tradition, there's kind of correct, probably correct, and not correct at all. And there are these collections or codes of hadith that are considered more authoritative than others. And of course, when treating non-Muslims, you have hadith going in both directions. So there's a very famous hadith that in some circles, you can guess which ones, is quoted quite a lot. The last hour would not come, like Judgment Day, basically, until the Muslims will fight against the Jews, and the Muslims will kill them, until the Jews would hide themselves behind a stone or a tree, and the tree would say, "O Muslim, the servant of Allah, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him." But that would apply to all trees other than a tree called the gharqad. That tree will not say that because it is a Jewish tree. I kid you not. And about when I was
No stranger than some of ours.
exactly, that's absolutely true. A few years ago, when I was in Calgary, there was a pretty big outcry because a local imam used this as a topic of one of his sermons. Interestingly, to convince the pro-Palestinian students not to really get too involved in the struggle against Israel because there is no point. Don't really bother doing this because when Yom Adin comes, when Mashiach comes, then all the Jews will die anyhow. So why bother? Of course, you have other hadiths that contradict that, say that Muhammad treated Jews very, very kindly and very, very hospitably. So, like I said, it depends which ones you choose, which ones you choose to quote, which one you choose to ignore, kind of like ours. Muslims are in the post-Quranic traditions, Muslims are commanded to treat the world is divided into two places, two segments. Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Harb. Abode of Islam. Islam and the abode of war.
What was the
Abode,
second one?
abode of war.
Say the Arabic.
Sorry, in Arabic?
Yeah.
It's Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Harb. Harb and Khair.
Sword.
And abode of Islam is all the countries or territories that are under Islamic rule, and the abode of wars are all countries and territories that are not yet,
Not what?
not yet under Islamic rule. And Muslims are commanded to fight the inhabitants of Dar al-Harb until they accept Islam, or at least accept the sovereignty of Islam.
But this is in a certain hadith.
This is interesting. Because when the first time I wrote that this is from the Quran, and then a student called me, a Muslim student called me out on that. And I checked it out, and it's like, no, it's not from the Quran, it's not from the Hadith. Nobody exactly knows where it came from, but it became so universally accepted.
The oral tradition.
It's an oral tradition that is considered authoritative. Yes.
I have a question about this supersessionism, I guess you call it in English.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I'm interested in the source that I've heard several times that if any Muslim ever set foot on the soil of a country, that country is considered a Muslim country. And this is why I heard and I read several times that they consider the United States to be a Muslim country because of the slaves that were brought here from Muslim countries. It's the first question. The second one, if someone has ever been Muslim and converted to another religion, they still consider him Muslim, correct?
So, the second question is easier. If someone was a Muslim converted to another religion, that person is called a murtid, and he has there's only one thing you can do with him. That person should be killed.
Killed outside.
No questions asked. And even modernist Muslims would say, this is obviously one of the more, let's call it, embarrassing bits of Islamic law. It's kind of like stoning Mechalelei Shabbos, right? So you know the drill with Orthodox Jews that we start saying, well, do you believe in stoning people who are Shabbos breakers? And they start saying, well, there's no Sanhedrin, right? But one day, maybe. And even if there is a Sanhedrin that kills one person every 70 years, it's Chabelanit, and this doesn't really work that way, but the law is still the law. So this is kind of the way it is written in let's say, left of center Muslim circles. Yeah, the law is there, but let's not talk about it. It's not really applicable. right now.
this geographical thing interested me because I've heard it several times.
The geographical thing is a topic of a lot of debates right now because is the United States or Canada or Europe, is that Dar al-Islam or Dar al-Harb? It's not a country ruled by Muslims, but it's not a country that is hostile to Muslims, so where does it fit? So there are people say it's called Dar al-Ahd, the abode of the covenant. People, these are countries that have agreement with Muslims. And some Muslims say, and rightfully so, Muslims are free to practice Islam in the West a lot more than they are in some Muslim countries.
Especially the diversity.
Exactly. Pakistan, for instance, slaughters some sects of Islam on a daily basis. Ahmadiyya Muslims, which is a pretty funny subsect. You can say that Ahmadis are to Islam are like Mormons to Christianity. Okay? And in Pakistan, it's illegal to be an Ahmadi, and they're being slaughtered on a daily basis.
What did you call that?
Sorry?
What was the term?
Ahmadiyya, followers of Imam Ahmad, okay? Ahmadi.
No, the abode of the covenant.
And the abode of the covenant, Dar al-Ahd, A-H-D. Ahd.
Can you just go back a bit, because I wasn't entirely sure I got the point. With the abode of Islam and the abode of war, and the people who are living in countries that aren't yet under Islamic rule, that's the abode of war?
Yes,
And
theoretically.
But it's okay if they acknowledge supremacy.
I'll get to that in a second. Yes.
I thought I heard you say that correctly.
The abode of covenant is countries that are not at war with Islam. And this is a pretty contemporary construct because a lot of Muslims just don't really know what to do with the situation of countries that are not Muslims but are not hostile to Islam. So one way of solving this is calling it the abode of the covenant. Another is Dar al-Da'wa. Da'wa means proselytizing or invitation, proselytizing. So it's basically, these are countries that make it possible for Muslims to invite people to Islam, right? It is, they can missionize here. So why bother killing people to forcefully convert them where you can just invite them? Yes?
I think it might be useful to point out how the differences between Sunni and Shia, and kind of the idea of how you might construct it in terms of continuity, much like Judaism and successionism. So there's a lot of confusion around
There's
that.
a lot of confusion. You know what? Let's keep that to the end because.
I'm okay with that. It's just I'm just hearing rumors of it. So.
Okay. Okay, you know what? Let's take 2 seconds to talk about that. Shia means sect, basically. And the split between the Sunnis and Shias happened in the early days of Islam with regards to who is the legitimate successor of the Prophet, basically. And Shia Muslims generally believe that the only legitimate successors were people who are blood relatives of Muhammad, rather than just people that had the skills to do it. Right now, about, I think, 13% of the Muslim world are Shia. Shias are a very diverse group because, as we know all too well, once you split, it's very easy to start sub-splits, right? So there are at least 5 different Shia sects that I can think of right now. And it is very easy to get tempted to say Shias are more radical than Sunnis or vice versa. It is just not true. It is completely meaningless in that regard. There are some Shia Muslims, like the Iranian regime, that are, well, pretty fundamentalist. There are Shia Muslims like the Ismailis, if you heard of them, who are also Shia, and these are the most modernist. They're like Reform Shias, basically. Yeah, no mechitza in their mosques, female leadership, they no head coverings.
What do they call it?
Ismaili.
Ismaili.
The followers of
And
Aga Khan.
which believes in the meritocracy as opposed to bloodline succession?
The Sunnis.
Sunnis.
Mhm, yeah. That's, so basically what I'm.
That division between the family and the disciples,
Mhm, yeah,
we find in almost every faith tradition after the death of the
absolutely.
The Druze.
And I think that the Druze are also,
Shia.
they came from the Shias, but they split completely. They don't consider themselves Muslim anymore.
Oh.
The Druze.
Also the Baha'i came from.
Yes.